Welcome to the Welsh Yogi podcast. Hare
Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the 122nd episode of the Welsh Yogi podcast.
122.
Today we're joined by Gopal Roy,
Gopal,
Jack, back to Jack.
Hey boo.
And myself, Prema. Lost my voice a little bit. We just had a really...
You've been a lot of singing, is it?
Yeah, it was a really awesome kirtan in the for the Sunday program. And what's going on? What's going on, Gopal?
What's going on? You're asking me?
Yeah. What's up?
What's going on? Same old. The world is still burning. I tell you what, maybe we'll kick it off with this, because it all like starting on a very happy note.
Yeah.
They did. We had His Holiness Dave Rita Swami with us recently, and he was saying how he was, because he went to Yale University. He was one of the first. He was the first black graduate of Yale University. He had a full scholarship. He's very, very intelligent. So recently, Yale, which is a big university, I think even like the current president of the United States comes from there and things like that. It's like they had a crisis that over the last 2 years, 13 students have committed suicide.
Wow.
Now, these are students who are like wealthy, have, if you're in Yale University, you got everything, the world's at your feet, really. Come from the best families, etc. But these are 13 students over 2 years have committed suicide. So this was a big deal. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but this is, so they did a big campaign of, we need to take care of the students. So we need to look after them. Like in that, we have like devotee care. So they had their like student care, we need to look after the students. And they did this huge campaign on the news and to find the person for the job, the person who's going to be the head of their care department to stop these students from, unaliving themselves, as they say in the algorithm. So they found this person, very qualified, professor, multiple PhDs, and they again it was a big promotion. It was on the newspapers. We found the guy. We're going to invest all of this money and manpower into solving this problem and looking after our students. After 6 months on the job, on Suicide Prevention Day, this person, this head of the sort of, I guess, mental health anti-suicide department that this university had promoted so much, he committed suicide, which is very heartbreaking. But it also shows how materially they're just completely in the dark about how to save society, how to save humanity, and especially when it comes to happiness. Even modern happiness engineers or socialists, they have no idea. They admit that it's temporary, material happiness is temporary, so they just try and draw it out. They offer different techniques on how to make it last a bit longer. So you can make your happiness from a material activity last from 10 minutes to 15 minutes or 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And there's certain things they tell you to do. Like, if you actually manage to get this happiness experience, then first step in order to try and like squeeze it so it lasts a bit longer is to jump up and down and shout about it. Yes! Yeah! Wow! I've done it! That draws it out a little bit longer.
Relish it.
And then the next thing to do is take a picture.
Okay.
Don't worry about the mechanics of the picture. Just take a picture as you can savor the moment. And another thing is you tell someone else about it. But even then they admit that it just is completely fleeting. It's just like
It's interesting you mentioned that actually, because Adi Carter Prabhu, he was saying a similar thing in India. The top university is IIT, and it's extremely competitive to get into that university, because if you can get into that university, you get a really good position abroad, maybe at Google or one of these big tech companies, and he was making the same point that there's a lot of suicide cases because they're so stressed, these students, and there's so much competition between them. And if one of the students is starting to not do so well, then they think, what's the point? May as well just give up. So this is happening across the board, it seems.
Sad, isn't it? It's really sad. And I think a lot of us have maybe because it's happening younger and younger now. Even recently in BBC News, they're reporting 1 in 10 children are being referred to a specialist because they have anxiety or depression or something. So, any
thoughts from you, Jack?
Something that I was thinking about is how we do book distribution nearly every day almost, and you generally meet a lot of students, a lot of people that are studying, and you meet thousands of them, and they all kind of the majority they all just say they study the same thing, same generic topics. You ask them, I try to open people's hearts a bit on Sankirtan, something I've been doing recently is trying to actually just open them a bit rather than just okay, what do you study? I study this, blah, blah, blah. Just all of these kind of yes and no questions. And a lot of people, there's nothing more to them than what they study, what they do for their job, and like you say, it's really sad, and there's no deeper dimension to the happiness that's being sold to them from society, basically, and it's just kind of a mass thing of this mass system of okay, just go in here and study this and then come out and do that, but I was just thinking how long will it take before you just have this mass amount of people that all have just got a degree in the same subject, and then then what, it's not just unlimited amounts of jobs in this kind of thing.
But even now I think statistically I think on average, if someone goes to university, they're 50% likely 50% of people go to university get a job that has nothing to do with their degree. But even then it's okay, if you want to study, but don't. I was speaking yesterday to someone who was studying medicine, Manas, his name is, shout out to Manas. And it was just after we had that talk by a Kundadi, or Martin Fleming, and talking about consciousness. And I was saying, well, in the universities, you know more than me, what do they talk about? How do they, what's the latest you're being taught about where life comes from and how does consciousness appear? And he admitted, and we also have a lady who was studying neuroscience in Cardiff University, and she was, admitting the same thing, that they'd have no idea where consciousness comes from. People say, consciousness comes from the brain. There's absolutely no evidence that consciousness comes from the brain. There's none. It's Manas was telling me yesterday, well, they think, they actually don't know, but they'll say, well, after a certain amount of complexity, then it's a property that just arises once things get complex enough. Yeah?
Yeah, because what Krishna consciousness is providing is you can study and do all these different things, but then there's a whole different, deeper dimension of your life that feeds into what you're doing and gives you a different whole level of happiness. It's not just I'm studying, I'm getting this job. It's okay, you're doing these things, but then there's a whole different realm of your happiness, which is the source of your happiness, which is the underlying thing of everything you do,
Yeah. Yeah, Krishna's he talks about Bhagavad Gita, the art of work. How work is meant to be really a type of yoga. So work isn't the end. Do you know what I mean? It's studying these days is almost like a means to an end. And it's the means to get a job, and then the job is just you can get some money, and the money is you can get some nice material facility, and then you can be happy. But Krishna really domesticates spirituality, and he says, no, your work can actually be part of your spiritual development if you can just see it properly. And then it doesn't matter what kind of job you do. In fact, he says some people have a certain inclination to one type of work and some people have an inclination to another type. And then, I was reading earlier, wasn't it, how Krishna says in the 18th chapter, I won't read the maybe I will. I'll read the purport.
Sure.
If I can. Oh, this is the Rakshasha bit, actually.
We're going to read that.
From memory, so I got the wrong thing on my phone. But it's in the, I think, just before you get to sort of text 50, maybe like the late 40s of chapter 18. And Krishna talks about how just like a fire is covered by smoke, anything you do in this world is covered by some fault. So the example is, even if you have a fire and you're using the fire for some purpose, then there still might be smoke in your eyes, but still, fire is still very pure, and you still should utilize the fire for whatever purpose you need it for. And don't mind if sometimes smoke might get in your eyes, or it's a little bit, there's some discomfort felt.
Yeah.
So similarly, we might have jobs or work in this world, and there might be some discomfort experience from doing these things, whether it's the people we work with aren't on our same wavelength, or commuting back and forth is tiresome or whatever. But those things like smoke coming from the fire, and actually if we engage our job or our work and dovetail it and use it as a way of self-purification, and whatever money or fruits we get from that, we allocate some of that to spreading spiritual life for other people, then such work is actual yoga. So that's the real meaning of work. And if you just work just for the sake of money and everything's temporary, then it's almost like it's a waste of human life then.
Yeah. I was just thinking in my head about, someone could say, well, okay, what if I'm just riding my bike somewhere? How does that have any fault in it? And I just thought, while you're riding somewhere, you're inevitably going to bump over probably some insects or some living entity. There's always some fault, in every little action, isn't there, that you could pick out? Something has to face the reaction for what you've done, or there's some reaction, but so what would you say to something like that? Someone who's worried because every action they do that has some impact, some negative impact possibly on others, in some way or some shape or form.
Yeah, there's different ways to look at it. Obviously you could live like a Jain, where you have like a mask, and the real serious ones, you sweep the floor before you walk anywhere, you try not to step on any living entity. In ancient times, there would actually be certain yagyas or sacrifices, in that sense, that a householder would do every day in order to atone for the sins that get committed. Even if you set fire to cook something, there's some living entities that naturally get killed without you meaning to and stuff. So like that, in that sense, there's no, the network of karma is so intricate that you can only really escape it through using this life the way it's meant to be used, and that's for understanding oneself and understanding Krishna. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that one who sees action present in inaction, and in inaction present in action, is wise. So someone could be very active, but if they're living a yoga lifestyle and they're doing everything for a spiritual purpose, then such activity is not accruing karma. This is where Arjuna gets confused with Krishna when he says, there is no karma. Now, Arjuna because karma can be seen is a word that can be translated in many different ways. So Arjuna originally thinks, karma means, because karma means activity. We'll get into it a bit technical now, but it means activity. But Krishna meant karma in terms of reaction. So one can work very busily and get no reaction, while someone else could do nothing and meditate. But if they have material desires for either yogic powers or adoration or something, these days they just, might want people just to give them donations. It's almost like a livelihood.
Yeah.
Then they get reactions for that, even though they're not doing anything. So the Bhagavad Gita makes you have to really discernment and the art of living in this world. So this is where the real sort of training should be. And what training in terms of your profession is can be there, but it can be secondary. And I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm just rambling now, but
I was gonna ask or like bring into the conversation how we're talking a lot about how you can work in the world and then you connect it to yoga and stuff, but then like what is actually like the deeper thing that you're getting, you know? Like, do you know what I mean? Like you're connecting your work to Krishna, etc., etc. But what is actually the happiness and the deeper experience that you're getting that like makes your life so much more profound and more spiritual and you know?
yeah, where do you go? I mean, there's so many different...
Because it's more than just like, now I'm working for Krishna, now I'm peaceful and that's it, you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's especially when one connects to Krishna, there's a higher sort of experience that comes along with absolutely everything you do. But also, just to put things in perspective, like... you know, Krishna, like when we talk about a lot of things, like even when we say materialist, like a real materialist is someone who actually knows how to like work in this world in a way that in their next life they get like a higher situation, whether it's on like heavenly planets or even in this on this planet in a higher position or something, you know. So a lot of the time, like, and that's traditionally like this might be alien to maybe some of our listeners, but the reality is billions of people all over the world do live with this kind of thought, like, okay, I'll act this way in this life, so in my next life I get something, whether it's most of the Hindu population or whether it's even a Christian, a Muslim, that they think, okay, if I live this kind of life, then in my next life I go to heaven. So it's that kind of like, I live a certain way in this life, I might perform some austerities now, but then my next life I get a better living situation.
Right.
So there's that aspect of it. Like, okay, if you live like this, then in the future, and Krishna says, you know, Mambu Petya Pranujanma Dakalaya Mashashvatam Napnavatni Mahatmana Sangsedim Param Gata Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punuravachojana Napnavatni Kunteya Punajanmana Vidyate. You know, there's so many different planets in this universe, but one who surrenders to Krishna doesn't have to come back and go up and down, and one can leave this material world. But anyway, the fact is we want to be happy, as we were talking about in the beginning of this podcast, and the actual experience of living a spiritual life gives such a flavor and a taste that one can experience now. As he said, Rajavidya Rajaguryam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Praktakshavagam Dharam Susukam Kartamavyayam. Krishna says that just by practicing this, it's the highest form of spiritual life and religion because you get direct perception from your senses. And susukam kartamavyam, it's joyfully performed, or one tastes superlative happiness just by engaging in this activity. Again, I'm just rambling, you guys.
Yeah, but then when one doesn't have this knowledge, then life is full of fear and anxiety. Devamrita Maharaj was explaining in his, in his preaching a while ago in New Zealand, that he was giving classes on Bhakti Yoga in university, you know, and they would get maybe like 14, 15 students coming. And he noted that one week they decided to change the topic to how to deal with, you know, the stress of student life. And he was going to the room and he expected the same crowd as usual. And he walked in and it was 300 students, you know. So they're all actually really, really hungry for this information. And he was saying that, you know, they hate to admit, you know, they won't admit this at first. They admit to being stressed, but they might not necessarily admit that they're actually really just very lonely, you know, experiencing, you know, just there might be so many people around them, but then how deep are those connections, how deep are those relationships, which is what's great about Krishna consciousness. It's like in my personal experience, I feel like I've experienced real relationship with others, you know.
Like Jack.
Yeah, real, actually caring for each other, not because you want something from the other person. You know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But we have a common cause, a common goal.
And you don't have anything. That's what we say. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you don't want something. Like, you know, you're both in the brahmachari ashram.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And even we got nothing to give each other in terms of like material. We don't have anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just have like the cloth you're wearing, maybe another 2 cloths if you like, two sets if you're lucky,
Yeah.
and a pair of shoes. That's it. A toothbrush maybe.
Some
And a
books.
gumshoe. Yeah. That's all you got. Like I said, I probably told a story before. Like we had a Brahmachari ashram in Treborth in Swansea.
Treborth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Do you know Treborth? Isn't it?
I can't remember.
that was back when we were like when I joined the ashram, you had to get up for Mangalati and jump in the van and drive for Mangalati because there was no question of walking to the temple because it was like a 2-hour walk.
Oh, wow.
You know, so you just had to, there was no other option. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd be so tired. Done to be there, ironing his cloth and listening to Prabhupada videos and stuff. And anyway, but when we got back to the ashram and our ashram had been robbed. You know, like thieves had been in, like we could say, like, oh yeah, the window's broken and stuff, and you could tell they must have been, because that's what thieves do. They scout out the place for a while, you know. So, but you could see that. I think one of the devotees maybe had like some speakers or something that was stolen. Other than that, nothing was. They didn't steal anything because we didn't own anything. They must have broken into the place and be like, "Who are these guys?" You know, they haven't got anything. You know, just some like pictures of Krishna on the wall.
Prabhupada, like,
Some little metal cups with like snake handles and stuff like we do. You know, like what's going on here? Like, you know, we didn't own anything. Our clothes are just sheets. You know, it's like, okay. So then in that case, you can be like, you know, if you can live like that, and be truly happy, you realize, yeah, I don't need anything. You know, your whole life becomes completely different then. Which is why like ashram training is a different kind of training than we were talking about, you know, people study and stuff, which can be there. But the kind of training that you get from learning that I can be happy without anything. If you can get that realization that all I need is just to chant and read these spiritual books and just be a servant of God, you're invincible for your entire life then. So whether one gets married or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because you know that, okay, I can be happy without anything else.
Something that I've been thinking about recently that kind of links, and I kind of spoke to, like, I asked the Kandadi this questions about like collective consciousness and stuff. I was just thinking it's really interesting how Bhakti is like a complete like joint effort, and it's like it's like impossible to basically do it on your own. Like you can only, it's a combined effort, and that's kind of like what Sankirtan means, like congregationally, like appealing to Krishna basically, and you know, like in the spiritual world, like you have all these different groups, like, and nothing's individually done, and it's all a one big kind of like group effort, you know, and like sometimes maybe you can get very like individualistic about like my sadhana, my, you know, my service, etc., and you can kind of forget that like, okay, this is like a one big group effort, you know, like.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's what. Like you never see Krishna on his own. And again, I know we keep saying, but Devamrita Swami was with us recently, and he also said to one devotee, like, you know, don't get into this trap of it was just me and Krishna. You know, got to see, and again, Prabhupada says the same thing when Krishna says that, you know, we should try and make our minds satisfied, and Srila Prabhupada says that you really get satisfaction by training your mind to always think of doing good for others. And that's something that even like some psychologists will tell you, if you're feeling that, try not to think too much of ourselves, but just try and think of doing good for others. You know, think of yourself less. Think less of yourself and try and be more selfless or something like that. You know, it's like a...
Yeah. The only thing that came to my mind was the great, you know, in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 8th canto, there's the great dwarf Vamanadev, and he makes that statement.
Vamanadev. Hear that song?
No.
Okay.
Cue it.
Vamanadev.
Okay, we'll pop it in the.
Okay.
But he makes that statement, doesn't he? Like, you know, if you can't be satisfied with what you have now, then nothing, no possessions will satisfy you, nothing at all. And that's really like powerful, because there's the arrival fallacy. We're always thinking, you know, when I get that, then I'll find the happiness, but it never comes. But then, like you're saying, the ashram is that excellent training where you learn to be satisfied with not only what you have, but even less than you thought you needed, just the bare necessities. And you find satisfaction in that. And then no matter what comes, you know you can be satisfied just with, you know, relationships with the devotees and, you know, Krishna and the books. And yeah, I find that really profound.
It's profound. It's the bare necessity, Mother Nature's recipe.
In the bare necessities of life.
Okay. Anything else to end on? I don't know if I just went. You can keep this in. I don't know if sometimes I just go off. I just go off on tangents, like, you know, like I went on a few little tangents just now, didn't I?
I think it was all contained.
It's a phenomenon that every podcast episode we record afterwards, it's like, oh, that was, you know. Do you ever feel good about an episode after recording it?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I would say I feel pretty satisfied most of the time. Sometimes you just don't know how it's gone until you listen back.
We got the mystic Jack with us anyway, so.
But like,
it's in his chart. It's in his like astrology chart that he's got mystic insights, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in
He's
there.
got his eye, on his tattooed like mystic eye in his.
One thing, like, you know, Chris, back to Chris. He works on the farm.
Yeah, I love Chris.
He's a legend. Yeah,
He is. Like,
he actually
shout out to Chris.
Every evening he looks after the farm. You know, every evening. But he was saying this to us in Swansea because he was overhearing our meeting afterwards and we were talking about how did the kirtan go, you know, and I was, you know, one of us was like, oh, you know, sorry, I didn't hit that beat on time, or, you know, just little things like that. And he was saying, you guys, you don't know just how much we just appreciate, you know, just what you're doing, and we actually don't really notice these little things that you think, you know.
I've got one person.
I notice like every tiny little detail.
Like, oh, I hit the cartels off on time. But he's just so grateful to have that experience because, you know, for some people that's their only, you know, experience of Krishna consciousness, maybe for you know, in that way. So like, same with the podcast, you know, it's like for us it might be like, oh, that was a bit shaky maybe, but, you know. Shout
out to Matthew.
He
came last Sunday. He said he listens to the podcast sometimes on his long drives, and he gave us some encouragement. So thanks, Matthew. It means a lot. Sometimes I can't stand listening to myself.
Yeah.
Every time I look at myself in a video or hear myself, it's like, you know. Right. Sorry, go on, Prema. What was it?
No,
I was going to ask, like, we're talking about like the group effort thing.
Right.
I was just like, I was wondering like how you really like become more advanced like in Krishna consciousness, but like do it as a collective together, you know, like, and like really progress kind of, yeah, through the stages or experience or whatever. But yeah, as a group, yeah.
I mean, just when you're saying that, one thing I can reflect back is I think it was a Radhastami class. I might be wrong, by Srila Prabhupada. And he's talking about the Hare Krishna movement. And he's saying, because you become spiritually advanced by just by reflecting off other people who are also trying to practice a spiritual path. And you can imagine at this time, Prabhupada is the only, not just like a self-realized person, but the only adult in the movement, let alone the only spiritually advanced person in the movement. I was listening the other day how, you know, Nectar of Devotion, one of our books, how that was released. The devotees who were like transcribing it and compiling it, the most senior devotee, the maximum they'd been around was 2 years.
Wow.
And they had no idea what they were putting down, because there's all these like detailed scientific bhakti terminology like bhav, anubhav, and all these, you know, vibhachari bhavas and stuff. Anyway, so Prabhupada was saying how he said, so he sort of gave it like, so you're associating with devotees makes you advance, and then that makes you advance more and advance. And he's basically talking about how just by associating with each other in the movement, you all naturally force each other to spiritually advance. And there's some things that, like, again, one of our senior teachers told us this. I think it was Dave Swami again. He was saying, look, some of you are new, so you have these jewels to look forward to. He said, like, generally men and, the boys and the ladies might have different characteristics of the mind and how it comes at you. Generally, the men are like, every man's an island. Get off my cloud. I got to practice Krishna consciousness, and these other prabhus are in my way or whatever, But after a while, you start to realize, like, we need each other, And, I mean, there was devotees that I joined with, and there was times we'd, like, and especially as we're growing up, like, when we're, like, early 20s and stuff, and naturally you're trying to, like, do certain scores, and there's, like, natural competitiveness and bravado, and we wanted to kill each other, I wanted to kill him, he wanted to kill me, But then, after years of just doing service to each other, you develop this kind of love that gets forged in this fire of sacrifice that is, like, so sweet. And I was speaking to those who've been practicing longer than me, and they were discussing how they remember being in the ashram and going out on book distribution with some devotees who are in the ashram, and then they see each other 20, 30 years later. And they just start crying when they see each other, because there's a kind of, like, and there's a Shakespeare Battle of Agincourt that Prema Ras used to quote to me, this, like, speech where basically it's like, and that's what we're doing. I've said this before, but we're establishing T Krishna, we're establishing a farm, a community. We're planting seeds of trees that we won't get to sit under the shade of. We're sacrificing ourselves, almost like pioneers, sacrificing ourselves for future generations. And anyway, in this speech, it's like, well, so in the future, people may sing of what you've done. People will sing of the devotees who sacrificed themselves to... And again, we had Gopinath Prabhu, who was here recently. He was one of the original Welsh devotees. And a lot of devotees don't even know who he is. I'm like, oh, this is Gopinath. Oh, him? Okay, yeah. Who's they?
Gopinath. Nice
so,
one.
like, and even with Tarakanath, and, in the future, people are like, wow, that's, okay. That might maybe understand, okay, yeah, it took some devotees some sacrifice in order to build this place, and they'll have, in the future, there'll be their own projects, etc. And that'll be fine. People will sing of what we've done here today, type thing. People will sing of the podcasts when they go on episode 3,999. Then remember episode 122, the classics, But the camaraderie and the experience and the friendship that we are having and experiencing with each other while this is going on, they'll never understand. Which is why we did a video a few months ago where if you want to get involved with this T Krishna project, get involved now. Don't wait until the doors are open and then come and see what's, I want to go to the Ayurveda, or I want to go to the temple when the temple's built or whatever. Come and get involved now, because this is a very special time where these relationships and the real sacrifice is being, like, sort of planted. And, like, again, Dave Marshall, you might not appreciate it now. Freaking Prabhu's taking too long in the shower, or, do you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't so sensitive to me just now or something. But over time, then these things are really, really powerful.
That's nice.
So I might not experience it now, and that's fine. But just know that these are being cultivated as time goes on. And then we might want to go back home, back to Godhead. And hopefully want to go back home, back to Godhead. But if I was going to go, I'd like to go with the devotees that I'm with now. Like, personally, I wouldn't like to go to the spiritual world and Tanknath not be there. And, do you know what I mean? Like, who am I going to have a laugh with? Like, so we get to... that sort of thing,
I think that's a mic drop.
Okay.
I think that's really inspiring, especially for us to hear that as well. because I do get caught up in stuff like that. You're wearing my slippers, or the way you said that wasn't really that nice, But yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's natural, isn't it? That'll be, over time, play the long game.
Prabhupada said there's an ISKCON in the spiritual world, didn't he?
Yeah. I asked Shiv Ramswamy once, I said, I was sort of like shy asking it. Have I said this before? I said this before, I think so. Anyway, I'll say it again.
Maybe.
I said, you go to the spiritual world, I'd like to go, but I like to be there with you and Takanath, and it's probably a quite conditioned way of thinking. But I go to spirit. I was like that when I went to secondary school. Like, didn't know anyone. I don't go out to spiritual world. Like, don't know anyone. Like, but like I was wanting to go with you, my spiritual master, and the devotees. I would like to serve there as we're serving here. Like, is that possible? And Shiv Rama, she's sort of like, he was saying, well, if you look at the way the spiritual world is, it's set up very, very similar to the way our ISKCON is set up. So you have like group leaders, you have like acharyas and group leaders, and they have like people under them, and they have people under them, and it's very like structured. It almost is like a business hierarchy type thing, the way that it's just so cleanly mapped out and organized. And he said, if you look, ISKCON's a lot like that. So he didn't sort of say one or the other, but he sort of hinted that it's so, or could be like as above, so below. Like we understand Prabhupada's there. And Prabhupada's going to be there with his associates, and do you know what I mean? And naturally you'll develop attachment to certain devotees, and ultimately we want to get attachment to devotees like Raghunath Das Goswami, Rupa Goswami, see them as part of our group. And then when you go to the spiritual world, you get trained under them or servants under them, like that. And so, and I'll end on this, and this is sort of like, I was always inspired by like Prahlad Maharaj prays that, I was suffering in a blind well full of snakes in this material world, and your servant Narada Muni saved me. Therefore, my first duty is to serve him. How could I leave his service? So it's a similar thing. It's like, okay, I want to go to spiritual world, that'd be nice, but there's certain devotees here that have saved me. I'm not going to leave their service. Just want to serve, and that's being the servant of the servant of the servant. Is higher than wanting to serve Krishna directly or whatever, So I think we should never lose this kind of attachment. And another thing Prahlad Maharaj says is that attachment that you have to materialistic friends and people, and if you can put that same attachment you've got to material friends, if you're fortunate enough to make that so it's attachment to the devotees of Krishna, then you go back to the spiritual world. You know what I mean? So if you can take some work, you know what I mean? Some work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welsh Yogi Podcast. Keep.
Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatyaja Satarini Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namani Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sati Devam Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavari Vasajadi Satarini Namaste Nityananda Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Bo, Nityananda Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. 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 Nityananda Bo, Hari Bo.